With A King in New York, Charles Chaplin was the first filmmaker who dared to expose, through satire and ridicule, the paranoia and political intolerance which overtook the United States in the Cold War years of the 1940s and 1950s. He himself had had bitter personal experience of the American malaise of this time. The right wing and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, had seen him as an ideal target, a foreigner who had never taken American citizenship and whose work had a natural appeal to the humanists and radical intellectuals who were now regarded as enemies of society. By the late 1940s, the political and personal attacks on Chaplin became so acute that in 1952 he was happy to be forced into a decision to leave America forever and make his home in Europe. To take up filmmaking again in Britain as an exile was a challenging undertaking. He was now nearing 70. For almost 40 years he had enjoyed the luxury of his own studio and a staff of regular employees who understood his way of work. Now, though, he had to work with strangers in costly and unfriendly rented studios. In the old days he could take all the time he wanted, trying things over and over again until he got them to his satisfaction. Now every minute cost money. Under such pressure, Chaplin completed shooting A King in New York in what was for him a record time of only 12 weeks, but the film shows the strain. The story is set in New York, but Chaplin was obliged to use London locations which are often less than convincing. He employed one of the cinema's great cameramen, Georges Perinal, but was generally in too much of a hurry to allow Perinal enough time to light the set properly, so that the photography often has a shabby look. The script too would have benefited from a good editor. In his satirical view of America, Chaplin takes on too many targets: widescreen movies, television commercials, cosmetic surgery, social pretensions, and a lot more. Chaplin himself insisted that he did not want to make a political film. His intention was still, as it had always been, he said, just to make people laugh. Yet at the centre of this imperfect film is a fierce and effective comic essay on political intolerance and its ultimate victims. Chaplin plays the main role of King Shardov, who flees to New York after a revolution in his Middle European kingdom, intent on a campaign for the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Unfortunately, his crooked Prime Minister makes off with the royal treasury, forcing the king to earn money by such demeaning stratagems as acting in television commercials. Visiting a progressive school, the king makes the acquaintance of Rupert, a small boy whose parents are left-wing activists. Later he meets Rupert again when the boy runs away from school to avoid interrogation by the Un-American Activities Committee. The FBI pursue the boy, and the king finds himself before the committee. His appearance is a fiasco. He gets caught up in a fire hose and soaks the committee. Later he meets Rupert again. The once spirited child is now cowed and ashamed. He has been tricked by the FBI into naming names, into acting as an informer against his parents' friends. It is interesting to compare A King in New York with an earlier film, The Kid, in which a small boy is also a central figure, as the ultimate victim of a sick society. In The Kid, the injustice of society takes the form of physical deprivation. In A King in New York, the child suffers something far worse. His honour, his conscience, and his soul are abused. The role of the small boy was of crucial importance. Like Jackie Coogan in The Kid, he is virtually Chaplin's co-star. It was a last-minute decision to choose his own eldest son, Michael, then 10 years old. Michael's parents thought of disguising his identity under the pseudonym of John Bolton, but the boy himself insisted on keeping his own name, Michael Chaplin. His performance is excellent. He plays Rupert as an odious, precocious brat, but at the same time makes him touching in his vulnerability. In later years, Chaplin and his wife would debate who was the better actor, Michael or Jackie Coogan, with Una Chaplin always championing her own son. Apart from all else, it was commercially audacious of Chaplin to make a film which he knew could not be shown in the United States, and indeed it was to be 16 years before A King in New York was screened there. In Europe, reaction to the film was generally favourable. Critics were not put off by the technical shortcomings, and indeed the distinguished critic Kenneth Tynan considered it a positive merit that nobody has subjected the script to a polishing job, which is the film industry's euphemism for the process whereby rough edges are planed away and sharp teeth blunted. A crude, free film is preferable any day to a smoothly fettered one. In A King in New York, Chaplin, unlike his contemporaries in Hollywood, was definitely and fearlessly unfettered.
Quitus Trailers, visítame.
Want to say a few words to the American people?
Just a moment, please.
Who are you?
I'm His Majesty's ambassador.
Here, sir, for the fingerprinting.
Your right hand, please.
Your Majesty, won't you say a few words to the American people?
I am deeply moved by your warm friendship and hospitality. This big-hearted nation has already demonstrated its noble generosity to those who come to seek a refuge from tyranny.
Released in 1957, A King in New York was Chaplin's penultimate film. Most importantly, it was the great filmmaker's last screen performance. The story deals with the American exile of a European monarch who has barely escaped a revolution, only to be caught in the world of commercials and television and involved in the McCarthyist witch hunts. For Chaplin, it was a way to portray his vision on the world, a bitterly satiric vision, both autobiographical and prophetic.
Tonight, I want the light and the frivolous. I want to see the top.
Steady, sir, steady.
Ah, Chamier, if you knew what it means to breathe this free air, this wonderful, wonderful America, its youth, its genius, its vitality, the glamour of it all, New York, America.
The film was poorly received because many saw it as being nothing more than Chaplin settling scores with America. When he made A King in New York, Chaplin was 67. He was the richest and most famous artist in the world, an Englishman who remembered going to America some 40 years before.
I think New York in this film is representational. It's not just representational as New York, but it's representational in terms of America as an empire, in a way. What he wants is to make a statement about the essence of America and via New York City. So, and this he does so beautifully because the film is about, I don't know, he goes on this whole, he flees his country, he comes to New York with what the press call, the press asks him, where's the loot? Where's all the money that you stole from your country? And he finds out that it's been stolen from him already. Like the money preceded him in New York and is already gone. And this is very much a representation to me of New York, because New York is not a city where there are any natural resources. It was a trading post initially, where now is Wall Street, and it's always been about conning people out of their money and about money. New York is about money.
Your questions, please.
And everything in this film shows how crass, in a way, American culture is.
Majesty's government. Documents were transferred out of the reach of revolutionary thieves and cutthroats.
Where are they?
And of course, the crass commercialization, commercialism everywhere you look in America. He even does something I find really brilliant. His first night when the king is in America, he hasn't realized that all his money is gone yet. And they go out on the town, and this is where they see rock and roll. And this is in the 50s, so rock and roll is a mass audience, cultural phenomenon in America, but the way he represents it in the film is really phony rock and roll. It's already been commercialized. It's almost like he was foreseeing the present with music like the Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears, or this kind of music that's devoid of any originality, but the form of it is foisted on you, is pushed on you in a commercial way. And then there's the incredible sequence when they're at the movies. And this is where, where the shootout, they're watching this gigantic CinemaScope screen. It's just hilarious. But even the content of these trailers is very insightful in terms of what American culture was then and continues to be. In so many ways, politically too, this film is kind of shocking in how it predicts the future of American culture.
Hello, honey. Are you nervous, bothered, and upset? Take off your clothes. Relax. With a bottle of Whitbread's beer, it'll give you pep and give you cheer. Remember, Whitbread's beer.
It's a constant barrage of imagery that's supposed to sell something to you. And if you go down to Times Square now, certainly it's the same thing. They're just now moving gigantic video billboards and flashing lights and almost naked girls. And it's the same thing, but just updated. So it hasn't changed really at all much. It's just, in a way, just gotten a little scarier, more intense. The stakes are higher.
To understand how A King in New York originated, we have to go back to 1952. Charlie Chaplin returned to his hometown, London, like the king of the world for the premiere of Limelight. He was welcomed as a national hero and received adulation from the crowds. But behind the official smile, the king's anxiety was evident. He had just been set upon by the American government and immigration services, who announced they were rescinding his re-entry visa to the United States. That day, Chaplin found himself an unwilling exile.
On the train heading for London, the city where he was born 63 years ago, Charlie shows his wife some of the places he knew as a child. The humble, poor places where he was reared, and about which his son Michael has only heard.
These are days of turmoil and strife and bitterness, he said upon his arrival. This is not the day of great artists. This is the day of politics. I do not want to create any revolution. All I want to do is create a few more films. I've never been political. I have no political convictions. I'm an individualist, and I believe in liberty. It's important to remember that Chaplin had never applied for American citizenship, and that he had just spent a rather difficult 10 years in the United States. Monsieur Verdoux had been a failure. He was taken to task for some sarcastic declarations about the country that had made him rich. He was suspected of concealing income from the Internal Revenue Service and of being a member of the Communist Party. His stay in London invigorated Chaplin. The accusations of the Attorney General, James McGranary, under pressure from McCarthyites, forced him to burn all his bridges with America. In November, during a lightning trip to California, his wife Una liquidated the Chaplin assets and recovered their fortune. She discovered that the FBI was out to get them, relentlessly questioning all the people who had worked for him. The Chaplin family arrived in Switzerland late in 1952 and moved into a villa in Vevey a month later. Here, Chaplin seemed to find the calm and serenity he had been deprived of in recent years.
Spring's the time for making love.
He quickly reorganized his activities. Feeling fairly isolated, he encouraged his young friend Jerry Epstein, who had been his assistant on Limelight, to join him in Europe. The very morning of his arrival, Chaplin, visibly shaken, informed him of the execution of the Rosenbergs.
One of the greatest peacetime spy dramas in the nation's history reaches its climax as Julius Rosenberg and Morton Sobel, convicted of revealing atomic secrets to the Russians, enter the federal building in New York to hear their doom. It is a stern jurist they face in Judge Irving Kaufman. He sentenced both Rosenbergs to death in the electric chair, and while appeals to the highest courts are planned, it certainly appears that the spies are headed along a one-way street.